Hello and welcome to this year's Play Creators Conference. I'm delighted to be joined by Fee Murray from Making Things for this good, the bad and the ugly of inventor life chat, Q&A. So Fee, we're going to dive into the good, the bad and the ugly of being a toy or game inventor. But before we do that, and I feel like we should be in ponchos and sort of cowboy hats and that sort of gear.
Yeah, I know. We should, shouldn't we?
Next time.
Yeah.
But for anyone that hasn't met you before, doesn't know much about Making Things, we should bring them up to speed on that. So what is it you do with Making Things?
Yeah, so with Making Things, so we're an invention and innovation studio. So on the innovation side, we do a lot of design and consultancy work for toy, games and entertainment studios. And similarly, actually on the invention side, that's who we work with, toy, games and entertainment studios as companies, but we license our own kind of unique concepts to them. So we generate a lot of in-house IP. And that could be a singular game, it could be a singular toy range. Often it's trying to create new brands. That's our kind of ambition as an inventor. And then we sell them to toy cos and game cos and entertainment studios.
Good stuff. So now let's dive straight in, and we'll start with the positive before we dive into the other stuff. So in terms of the good, what do you find some of the good in regards to life as a toy or game inventor?
Do you know what? There's so much. I was thinking there should be something like the awesome, the good, the bad, because it kind of goes a bit. Yeah, I think there is there's so many, and it's a very fortunate job to be able to do, and to call it a job is, I think, a really fortunate thing. For me, the part of the reason actually why I wanted to leave in-house was, I suppose, to have a little bit more ownership of my kind of destiny, and where I can then take the concepts that I come up with and what I think hopefully should be done with them and who they should be placed with, because obviously when you generate in-house, there's only one place for them to go, and that's for the company that you're working with. So yeah, that's very exciting, that there's just the opportunities and the breadth in which you can create ideas for is massive, because there's lots of companies out there, all with very different portfolios. And then coupled with that, I think the best thing about the whole industry as a whole is probably being able to share concepts. So it's something that I think we talk about a lot actually on Inventors, and especially in these types of conferences, is it's a very unique industry to be able to share concepts that aren't necessarily patentable, aren't necessarily protectable in the sense of a kind of a legal documentation, but what you do have is that you've created something very unique in your brain, and therefore that has a level of value that then you can generate a whole brand off the back of it and license it, which is very unique. It's quite rare that happens in other industries. So sharing a concept and being able to, I think as well that the sharing aspect, I love being able to pitch concepts and then discuss them, because it's just fantastic when you share an idea and you can tell on the other side of the table that they've got it, and they kind of also, not only have they got it, but their brain is starting to build upon it and think of other ways in which that idea can go, which is always the best thing. I don't think an idea is ever worse for sharing it. Keeping an idea in is quite possibly the worst thing you could do. So I think being able to share it is fantastic, and have those collaborations as well with other inventors and other studios. That's another aspect of it as well. So
yeah, amazing. Yeah. And was there any, you mentioned there obviously before going out on your own you worked at Vivid. Was there any of these sort of pro side of things that came to light in a way that surprised you, going from in-house to solo inventor? Are there any of these good things that you didn't realize that would be as much of your sort of day-to-day now?
Yeah, do you know, I think actually the part that's probably increased a lot of it is the collaborating and having kind of joint ventures together. So I was very lucky that when I left Vivid, a lot of my kind of peers at the time, they had already left, or they were already leaving. And I think the toy industry as a whole was having quite a bit of a switch up with people leaving and going to new places and things like that, which now when I think of today, I'm working with very closely with my old R&D director. Sometimes I work with my old CEO. There's a real kind of nice mix of really familiar faces that you get to collaborate with on some really cool projects, all the way through to the Far East and Hong Kong, and working with the crew out there, which is really cool. So yeah, that's amazing. And then also new collaborations that if I was in-house, I never would have got to work with them in the the relationship that I have with them now, it would have very much been an in-house and external supplier role, but I get to kind of be the same as them, which is really lovely. So that would be collaborating on an invention to submit to toy companies.
Absolutely. And as useful as it is to hear about the good side, I think there's probably just as much to be gained from diving into the bad. So so what have been some of the other side of the coin side of being an inventor?
Yeah, for sure. There's some realisms to inventing, for sure, especially when and you're attempting to make it either your studio and your kind of agency's full-time output, which is very, very challenging. And people can do that, and they manage to do that when you get the cash flow coming in, obviously, from a few concepts, or you've definitely got some legacy concepts in there that can bring you in the revenue, and you can therefore continue to run on the royalty model. But for me, I think the challenge probably is the financing side. That's a thing, especially when you come from in-house and you've got your kind of regular safe salary that you get every month, and you kind of strip that away. And I think I started making things with a month's worth of salary savings. And I think when I first met someone, they said I should have at least 2 years. So I'd sort of started off on the wrong foot there, but that was fine, because I knew that my ambition at that point, and it still isn't to be completely solely inventing. I do love doing a lot of the consulting side as well, and that's a big part of the studio. So that is what has allowed me then to invent and invest that money back into, whether it be my time or prototypes, or outsourcing different elements of prototypes as well. So yeah,
amazing. And then to shine a sort of bright light. I know they should be the bad, so we should be all doom and gloom. But would you say, especially for either newer inventors or other pros who are solo, did you find that actually, obviously that is one of the big sort of changes and the big risks in terms of the finances side, but on the plus side, did you find actually, as a new studio, that companies both big and small wanted to see you, wanted to have your meetings? It's not the case that when people do this and they leave and they start on their own, that they've got that financial risk, but then they have to suddenly work super hard to find the right contacts. Did you find that people were open and they liked seeing new faces, new inventors, and having those meetings?
Yeah, 100%. People, there's not. I haven't ever approached anyone and they've kind of said, our supplier list is full type thing. It all depends on if you're showing them something that they really want, then they'll listen to anybody. So I think that does help. Getting there is a different thing. I think getting to the point that you can get in front of them, again, having been in the industry, I was very lucky that I did have contacts, and I did have people who'd been on the outside or were on the outside in other companies. So it meant I could kind of hit the ground running with meetings and pitches already scheduled in, some retainer work already kicking off. It just meant that, the finances weren't a case of I have nothing and I need to now start from scratch, which I can imagine could be very challenging. And you also have to make sure you have a lot of ideas. I think that's one of the scariest things, I think, of being an inventor. If you're an inventor with one idea, and it doesn't mean that it's not going to happen, because it could be a fantastic idea, and sometimes you only do need just one idea. But if you want to run a business and license multiple products each year, which you would need to do in order to bring in a cash flow to bring in some money from that way, then you need to have lots of ideas to show, lots of ideas licensed, because those ideas don't last very long once they make it to market. And when they make it to market, they might not actually perform to the level that you had hoped anyway. So you just need a constant flow coming through.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the ugly, which, just when you think it can't get worse, what are we saying? What are you putting forward for this the final one?
You know what, again, there isn't very much, which is lovely, but I think the one that probably is the one that maybe just gets you a little like, it's a bit annoying, I would say, is probably being ghosted. And I say that in the most kind of professional sense, in the fact that as an inventor or an external supplier or anything, when you're no longer in-house, and maybe I feel differently because I have experienced in-house, you very much feel from being in and part of a team and part of a crew, and then you are suddenly on the outside, kind of knocking on the door saying, hey, can I show you some stuff? And oh, I know you, but I don't know you. And oh, actually, I don't know any of you in this building. Can I show you some stuff? I used to do some stuff here. And you feel like you're kind of continually maybe doing that for a little bit, not all the time. And then I think the part where it can then make you feel more like that is when you don't necessarily get responses, when I think probably a response is warranted. So I'm not talking about unsolicited kind of speculative, I've pinged you my PDF on LinkedIn and here's my doodles, none of that sort of stuff. But you've gone to an arranged pitch, you've shared an NDA, you are exchanging copyright, content, ideas, you've sent over assets based on that they want them submitted. And it's happened quite a few times. And I think at that point, not kind of from the same people, but there's quite a lot of, it's quite vast and common actually how much it does happen that you send an idea in based on as well potentially some feedback, so you might have tweaked a few things, and then to hear nothing. So it's never, the disappointment is never a no with the idea. That, to be honest, is something I expect pretty much with every single concept, because it is so rare and actually quite hard to get an idea licensed. And you need to have an incredibly thick skin, and you need to hear a lot of no's and a lot of feedback that is usually very positively constructive as well. And I just think when you don't get that and you get nothing, it's very difficult to then move forward with that relationship, because obviously you can't then show them future stuff because you haven't heard from the previous. You might do a few chases, but you're kind of just feeling like you're shouting kind of into the dark.
Yeah, and I suppose that's like what you said about it being it's relationship management. It's you're not it's not frustrating because it might be a no or a maybe or a, it's not that. It's the fact that you need to know what their views are on it so you can move forward with it or drop it, and also keep their your next meeting with them. You don't want to you want to know whether you're showing new stuff, whether you're having to ask about the old stuff. I suppose it's about keeping those relationships in the best state they can be.
Exactly. And you also don't want to, I know kind of firsthand from being in-house, just the sheer amount of emails you could have sitting in your inbox at any one time. You could have 300 unread emails, depending on what kind of time of day you've opened up your laptop and what's coming in from around the world. It's intense. And a lot of inventor relations marry up with R&D tasks. So it's not that common that every single toy company or every single games company has dedicated inventor relations. A lot of it is people doing that plus 1,000,001 other jobs. So I can completely understand how busy people are, and also why people don't respond for a very long time. I've had concepts go in that I thought had kind of just hit a blank wall, and then a couple of months later you hear some really good news. So it's also, you don't ever want to kind of approach it that, well, they've never responded to me, so that's kind of it. It's not that. I think it's just the not knowing is what eats people up. And I think we were comparing it to kind of like dating. If you went on a date with someone and you thought it went really well and they tell you all of this positive stuff and then you just don't hear from them, you've essentially been ghosted, and it's just a bit of a weird feeling, I suppose. But the odd thing with inventing, that kind of can happen to you, but then you think, oh, I'm probably going to have to like see them at an event, or there'll be another pitch event, and you think, it's like a year later, do I just say that never heard from you? Or so yeah, I think
to really sound like dating now, even bumping into them at a wedding at all, so.
Oh yeah, exactly. So I think that's just a bit of a niggle. It's like one of those things, but you just gotta deal with it. And
from our point of view, one thing we hear on that is that it's it's sometimes not being prepped from the off in terms of laying out, and there are lots of brilliant IR people that do this, but sort of set expectations in terms of, this is when we try and get back to you, this is the sort of process, this is exactly where we're at, and sort of just so that moving into these things, if someone gets told it might take this amount of time to get back, then they're prepped for it. But also, a bit like what you said there, it's that thing of, especially the companies being very in a meeting, saying one thing or being incredibly enthusiastic or laying down certain things that set up expectations to hear back at a certain point, even if that's not going to be a definite yes.
Yeah.
It's when those sort of things don't get met, when you sort of think, well, in the meeting it seemed like this was
exactly that. And I think this is why it is still wholeheartedly positive, because it's very few in between that happens. And I think there's so many, baffles me that the workload that they must juggle whilst also being able to provide feedback on concepts, because I suppose it's never, and it's often never actually about that individual idea. It's often about the next idea. So it's why a lot of inventor relations people do supply feedback, and sometimes often quite substantial feedback. And that's because they want the next one to be right for them. So this might not be right for us, X, Y, Z, but we think this is good about it. This is cool. Or actually, it's an awesome product. Go to those guys. It's not for us. That type of thing happens all the time, which is fantastic. It's then taking that and improving it for the next idea. Whereas if you just hear nothing, you just can't do anything with that, isn't it? It's just kind of the relationship it's not a relationship. It's just a bit of it's a one way, they're just not that into me, and you just got to accept it.
Fan mail. It's fan mail, basically.
Yeah, you just,
So in terms of,
yes, it's crazy.
Is there a science to chasing? Is there a, when you're finding out, is there an element of, doing it without, I don't know, without feeling like you're pestering, or do you just have to sort of go, you know what, they know I'm going to be checking?
I think for me, and it's just, maybe it's a personality thing, but I would never ever want to, because I suppose it's an ugly, but it's like I say, it's a bit of a niggle, but you never want it to kind of ever get to a point where you want to shut the door on that relationship either. So I think you have to be just very, very careful with how you, I think, speak to people and chase people, because you don't know what's going on kind of behind closed doors. You don't know that if you haven't heard from them for a couple of months, it is because actually they have been reviewing it. They just forgot to kind of let you know in that sense, and they have been working on it. That has happened to me before. And yeah, I know that I'd have a prototype sitting on my desk back when I was in-house, and I'd have my CEO coming around saying kind of like, have you been able to look at that yet? And I'm like, oh, no, there's kind of like the 5 other brands, and then there's the licensors, and there's just a lot going on today. I haven't got a chance to look at it yet, but I will. Now you've chased me again. And it's, there's all this stuff happening, and you don't necessarily know what's happened as to why they've said no. So I don't think you can just assume it's because they're just a bit rubbish at replying. It's probably more often than not more than that. So I think, you've just got to kind of take it with the punches, I suppose. But the way to nudge people along as well. I've spoken to lots of other inventors about this type of stuff, and they often say, there's other things I want to show you, and that often helps, because potentially that company wouldn't want to miss out on that inventor's next batch of stuff. But they'd like to know what you thought of the first batch of stuff you've shown them. So that sometimes works, just to kind of G them up a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it all depends on the appetite as well of if the company is really looking for new IP and is looking to build their inventor relations, because a lot of them, do have maybe regular partners that they work with. And like we were saying earlier, they'll still be open to seeing a company, but it's still quite sometimes a big shift for companies to then work with a new inventor. It's a new relationship. It's a new contract, just the way in which they work, especially if it's a bit of a collaborative invention and it's a bit more of a partnership development, can be a new thing for them. And new things are sometimes a little bit tougher because no one's done it before. And maybe that's where some of it slows down a little bit. Yeah,
no, that's fascinating. And I think there's across the good, the bad, and the ugly there, I think there are some brilliant insights for both established inventors, people weighing up joining the inventor group and going down that route, and also for IR people to hear about this sort of stuff and to sort of listen to some of those things.
Yeah, and I'm sure what majority of them, I'm sure they've heard it from other inventors, and it's the world we live in now is so amazingly technologically advanced that it's quite difficult to these days kind of miss an email or that type of thing. We'll have someone might be using Trello, or there's a Kanban board someone's got for monitoring ideas in and out, or there's official platforms that they are using which is fantastic because it's evolved so much than what it was before, which would have been picking up the phone and hoping that you were getting through to somebody. And then the events that you guys put on before a lot of that stuff existed at all of the toy fairs and things, it very much would have been, I've rocked up to your stand at Toy Fair and I really hope I can get a meeting. And it, would have been very, very speculative pitching. Whereas, now you get wish lists, there's events, there's a whole system. And I think that's what's great as well, is when a company puts out a wish list, for them, it's as much as they'll see stuff constantly throughout the year, it's quite a manageable process. A lot will come to them in one go after that wish list or innovation presentation that they do to everybody. But after that fact, they get to then build that into their seasons, and which they then want to be able to give the brand teams enough time to develop the product, to take it to market. So it just becomes a very organized pipeline for them to fill product. So I think the people that kind of do it that way, and then of course they'll see ad hoc stuff just in case that thing that comes through in a random time of year is perfect for them. But I think that's where they kind of have a bit of a winning formula to inventor relations.
Absolutely. And I suppose on the whole, it sounds like, you think it's probably quite a good time to be an inventor at the moment with regards to all that.
Yeah. Do you know, I think it's challenging because of obviously what's happening with everything at the moment in terms of products getting to market across all avenues, COVID plus 8 other million issues going on in the industry. But I think it's it's a real challenging time. Costings are difficult, everything's getting tough. But if you have an idea and it's good enough, then someone will want it. And if it also is an idea that is right for children at a right time of a year and the right time that it's going to be launched, then it's always a possibility that your idea will make it out there.
Amazing.
And if it doesn't make it out there in certain ways, there's other ways to get it out there.
Yeah.
So
100%. And then before we wrap up, if there's anyone watching this who either an inventor that wants to reach out and have a chat, or a company that doesn't work with you that thinks I'd love to see what Fee's got, what's the best way they can reach out to you and making things?
Oh, so they can just go to my website, or they can hook me up on LinkedIn. Great. Either or.
Good stuff. Well, amazing. Thank you, Fee, for delving us into those 3 areas. I really appreciate your insights and honesty.
It wasn't too ugly. It was all right.
Nothing too controversial. I think we've made it through. So huge thank you for that, and thank you to everyone for watching. And we'll all catch up again very soon.
Cheers, Billy.